Here at Pan M360, we have the duo Étrange, including Vanessa Croome and Sahara von Hattenberger. Both musicians and singer are originally from the West Coast. So
Yes.
you came in Montreal, both of you, a few years ago. Resume your own journey from the West Coast to the East.
You want to go first, Sarah?
Yeah.
Well, Vanessa and I both went to McGill, and our time there actually overlapped. But because, of course, I'm an instrumentalist and she's a singer, we never spoke to each other, as is typical. And I moved here more recently than Vanessa, and I was looking to do a collaboration with a singer because I thought that that was something that's not often done as a cellist. You know, pianists collaborate with singers all the time. Cellists don't really collaborate with singers. And I thought that it was a really cool concept. So I know Simon Blanchet, he was like, let's do this at Chapelle du Bon Pasteur, and I needed to find a singer. And so I explored and I listened to recordings, and I thought, oh my goodness, I just fell in love with Vanessa's voice. And so I wrote her this very lengthy email and thought, you know, she doesn't know who I am. She's not going to want to do this concert with me at Chapelle Historique du Bon Pasteur, but she was actually down to do it, which was amazing. And then after that, we were like, we want to form a duo. We want to do this, but there was no repertoire. So the whole ATMA album kind of came from let's create repertoire for this duo because basically none exists. And so we've commissioned all Canadian composers, mostly Quebec composers, to basically expand that repertoire and create it because it's never been created before. So that's sort of how we met. And
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
I wanted to add something that Sahara didn't mention is that we actually grew up a couple hours from each other in British Columbia.
On a remote island.
The town I was born in is called Nanaimo, and I lived there until I was 16 when I moved to the States for my musical training. And Sahara also left at 16 to move to Montreal for McGill. So we kind of have these paths that have been doing this our entire lives. And then we finally met through the collaboration at Chapelle, just actually also a month before it burnt down, very tragically. So it's just kind of crazy, like it's serendipitous. I don't know if our recital would have been canceled if it had been, a month later. So it's kind of crazy that we ended up together like that. And Sahara sent me this email, which I want to frame one day because it was about this long. And I think usually when you get an email that's that long, you kind of panic, but the way she emails is the most, I've never met a more captivating emailer than Sahara. So that's kind of our mission that we've come together. And we both also come from, ma mère est originellement québécoise, puis aussi le père de Sahara est français.
Oui, vous avez aussi des racines françaises aussi.
En fait, c'est ça. Donc, nous deux, on avait toujours les rêves d'habiter à Montréal comme les jeunes filles de l'Ouest. Donc, c'est aussi ça un peu, c'est notre lettre d'amour en love letter, notre lettre d'amour à Montréal et au Québec, cet album, parce que nous, on a vraiment découvert nos esprits artistiques ici à Montréal et on a aussi les racines profondes ici maintenant artistiques grâce à les différentes opportunités qu'on a découvrir dans la scène musicale québécoise qui est assez riche.
Oui.
Et il y a beaucoup d'art magnifique ici. On va voir dans l'album, on travaille avec beaucoup de différents compositeurs québécois et québécoises. On fait les femmes et les hommes. Et c'est incroyable. Donc, c'est ça, on est tellement chanceuse d'avoir cette opportunité de vraiment collaborer ensemble, mais aussi mêler ensemble nos identités de l'Ouest et de l'Est et français, nos histoires français aussi. Donc,
il y a beaucoup
c'est un peu notre histoire.
Oui, c'est ça, mais vous n'êtes pas les premières de l'Ouest à venir vous installer à Montréal pour les qualités artistiques de Montréal, pour le contexte plus favorable. Vancouver est une ville formidable, magnifique, mais il y a quand même moins d'action qu'à Montréal pour la culture.
Oui, c'est juste une place un peu différente. C'est magnifique comme ville aussi, avec les montagnes et l'océan. Je me dis toujours, l'océan, ça me manque incroyablement.
Oui, puis Nanaimo est une pépinière d'artistes. On connaît Diana Krall, on connaît
c'est vrai, oui.
Lisa Jensen, Ingrid Jensen, which is maybe the best trumpet player in the jazz world and the feminine world. And her sister Christine is now, I think she's teaching at Rochester, but she spent most of her professional life in Montreal. Donc,
BC, I think there's something maybe in the water there. There are a lot of artists, and I think it's also just a very progressive and lovely place to grow up. So it was a very encouraging place to be a young person and to, you know, I played in band and was in choir and in many community theater, which Sahara was as well. So yeah, we have a kind of a funny story that has finally brought us together for this album.
Let's dive a little deeper in the concept of, you know, combining a soprano voice and a cello. So it's a great challenge. It's not common, as Sahara told us, but maybe we can know more about this motivation.
I think that if you think about like the troubadours of the ancient times, right? It was very common for a duo to sort of tour, and there would be a singer and usually someone playing maybe the lute or the viol da gamba, right? But, you know, the modern cello is less of a chordal instrument, less of an accompanimental instrument, and sort of more of a solo voice in and of itself. But it still has the potential to also accompany. And so what I find interesting about doing duos with Vanessa is, yes, we can do duos where, you know, we're accompanied by other instruments and we're two voices, which is really interesting. But when we play just the two of us, it gets even more fascinating because we're like two voices. Sometimes I'm the accompaniment, sometimes Vanessa is the accompaniment actually, and the cello becomes the main voice. And so you can do these really interesting things that you're not used to hearing. And yeah, I find that fun. What do you think, Vanessa?
Yeah, it's the cello, like Sahara said, I think of it sometimes as like in a duet setting, it's like the alto voice or a mezzo soprano that I might sing with. And so it's like a duet when we play together. And singers typically work very often with pianists. And sometimes, you know, orchestral settings as well is also very standard. But to have that kind of one-on-one relationship with an instrument, I think has also just shown me the different capacities of the voice that I think can really come into play when you're in this more kind of, it's a more acoustic type. I mean, it's always acoustic, but you get this more unplugged feeling, for lack of a better term. We use that a lot in like commercial music, but it's that feeling of it's very intimate and it's very unique. And yeah, it's like singing with a singer, but with a cellist.
Yeah, it's like two voices because
exactly.
Of course we know the cello as a melodic instrument, but it has also harmonic properties. If you play pizzicato, do you sometimes explore the harmonic aspect of the cello when you're playing pizzicato with a voice?
Absolutely. I mean, the cello is such a versatile instrument because of its huge range. So you can pretend to be a guitar or a lute, and then you can go into even arco with the bow. You can play very fancy accompaniment with very, you know, virtuosic lines that accompany Vanessa. So I find it fun to play with those things. And it's also, I think, the perfect pairing because the cello is on sort of the lower end and it balances well with Vanessa's voice because she's a very high soprano. So it's acoustically, it really meshes well, I find. Better than, let's say, a soprano and a violin, right? Which would sort of be two high voices sort of playing together.
Well, Sahara, do you think extended techniques are also useful as a celloist for this duet?
It depends what kind of extended techniques you're talking about.
Well, I mean, you extended techniques as a celloist, you know, there are, maybe you're into, you're exploring those techniques, maybe not. I'm just asking.
Well, I mean, extended techniques is sort of a controversial subject for me because I like using extended techniques in sort of tonality or modality, you know, so using ponticello, using even some scratch tones, I think can bring out certain sound effects, and you can imitate animals, and you can imitate birds and city noises, which is really cool. But I think sometimes contemporary music can sort of delve into this. Every note must be extended technique. And, you know, that's cool. That's the avant-garde, but that's not the kind of music that Vanessa and I are sort of interested in commissioning. We want to focus on accessible music that even the first time listener is going to love. You know, that's sort of our like mission. So, you know, we like doing high classical music, but we're not like into weird avant-garde stuff that's just noises rather than notes, if you know what I mean. So yes, I do love extended techniques, but it depends how they're utilized. And I think
it can be only a sort of ornament or just very small details that can be added.
Yes.
But I know, I listened to your music. Of course, it's not atonal. Well, you like Nicole Lizée. Nicole Lizée is a great contemporary composer that is not always using normal scales.
No, she isn't. But her music is still very, I don't know. I mean, she also uses elements of pop too, but then mixed in with the avant-garde. And I think it's in a way that actually brings in the audience and would bring in new listeners to classical music, which is very interesting. And also, you know, Vanessa and I have been working more on our own sort of composition and improvisation, because we want to be kind of like the old school troubadours when we do shows and combine storytelling and poetry and, you know, these sorts of things to tie the works in together and, you know, create something that's more welcoming and personal for the audience, if that makes sense.
This fall we have an opportunity to workshop Ligadi's Danse de Macabre with the Yellow Barn Chamber Institute in Vermont in the US. And this is the kind of example of we do still obviously like to work on the contemporary composers as well. Ligadi is very known and of course for his more atonal and kind of avant-garde compositions, but because of the nuances of our duo, what that means is there will be extended technique for Sahara, but also for me. There will be we're playing with percussion instruments as a duo, and Sahara was talking about troubadour, the history of troubadours, and that is really how we see ourselves as people who are telling stories and using many different styles of classical, or what we call classical music to teach.
So you're exploring some original compositions and also music from the great repertoire. We think about Maurice Ravel or even André Previn, who are very well-known composers, of course, but you're also interpreting Nicole Lizée's music, Airat Ishmuratov, a post-romantic Russian-born Montrealer, Laurent Jobidon, Jeffrey Fong, Luna Pearl Wolf. So it's very broad.
Yeah.
Right.
So how did you choose those guys? And can you just tell us your journey through their music?
Well, I can go. We chose everyone, I think, for specific reasons, and Sahara, also feel free to chime in. It was kind of, I think, I'm trying to remember who was the first composer. We knew we wanted to work with Nicole. That was a goal. And we actually emailed her. We just like cold emailed her and Sahara emailed her, actually, as a great emailer. She's amazing with emails, and sends her a message, you know, who we are, what we're trying to do. And we were always just a fan of her work. And I think Sahara talked about it. She blends the avant-garde with more popular pop culture concepts. And that was really interesting to us. We really like the idea of music that exists at the intersection of two concepts. So whether it's old and new, avant-garde and commercial, just we think that, you know, c'est un peu comme Montréal aussi, il y a les cultures qui sont toujours qui croisent et on trouve qu'il y a la magie à l'intérieur quand c'est comme ça. So for our music, we were really inspired by this, and Nicole is a composer who really symbolizes this for us. For other composers, Jeffrey is a friend a personal friend of ours who is also a composer and was at McGill around at the same time. And he started writing this piece. When did he start writing it? A few years ago.
But that's like, we recorded his piece because even though he's a young composer and relatively unknown, he writes this beautiful music that is almost very French in how it sounds. It sounds like French impressionistic music. You probably listened to it, Alain?
Yes, I did. I saw the video.
Yeah, and it's in medieval French, and we just really love that concept. So we were like, okay, that needs to be on the album. This based on the text of Roman de la Rose, which I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but it's just a stunning piece of poetry, and the language is also particularly interesting.
Yeah, the ancient French, medieval French that it sets was very interesting to study when we were recording this piece. But we were really struck by the text. I think that's what started Jeffrey's inspiration, was the Roman de la Rose text, like last summer. And this piece, I've worked with a good number of contemporary composers already in my career. I've been very fortunate, and I couldn't believe Jeffrey's piece was like almost the first version he sent us. I was quite impressed, and it really flowed really well for Sahara. And I think it's because he's a friend, so he was writing knowing what we sounded like, knowing our instruments and how we played. And so we had brought Jeffrey in. I'm trying to think of the other composers. It started like a domino. We started with, and we had Laurence Jobidon as well, who I was very fortunate to work with during my time in the atelier at Opéra de Montréal. Pour son opéra L'hiver attend beaucoup de moi, j'ai eu la chance de créer le rôle de Léa. Donc, j'ai travaillé avec Laurence beaucoup, et puis aussi à travers ça, elle est devenue un peu une amie personnelle aussi. Donc, on a commencé ce projet. En fait, elle était une des premières compositrices. C'est ça qu'on a... on a lancé un peu le projet. Puis, elle était invitée à notre concert à la Chapelle historique. Donc, c'était après ce concert qu'on voit un peu comme le début de Duo Étrange, que ça a vraiment commencé une conversation avec Laurent sur le sujet d'une pièce, quelque chose pour nous. Et ça, c'était même avant l'album. Donc, quand on a reçu le projet d'album de ATMA, on a dit, OK, on va définitivement travailler avec Laurence. Puis moi, j'adore aussi sa musique. Elle écrit vraiment pour la voix. Elle est orguiste, en fait, elle joue l'orgue. Donc, on voit souvent les textures assez denses, assez intéressantes dans sa musique, mais toujours la ligne vocale, comme une vocaliste, c'est toujours écrit vraiment une voix lyrique, et elle aime bien jouer avec les différentes couleurs, les différents thèmes dans la voix. Donc, c'est un peu ça comme on a décidé de travailler avec elle. For the other composers...
Luna Pearl-Wolf encore?
Yes, we love Luna. We're a fan of a lot of her works. She actually writes quite often for voice and cello. And so I had met her through the Musique Toi Femme network. And if you're familiar with that organization, amazing organization that supports female composers, female identifying composers in Quebec and Canada. Luna works with them very often and is also associated with McGill. So I had a certain rapport with her, and Sahara started bringing her cello music to my attention, cello voice. And so that's how we ended up down that road, and her Rumi suites really spoke to the theme of the album, which is this ancient setting of text in a more modern context. So we love Luna. Sahara was the one who unearthed a lot of her amazing works for voice cello.
So we don't need to present Maurice Ravel and André Previn. Maybe yes, if you want, but...
Well, yeah, Previn is a favorite of mine. Sahara, when you originally created the concert program, so our first Chapelle concert, Chapelle Lancaster, André Previn, we did 4 songs for voice, cello, piano, and one of the songs, which is a set, beautiful set, and one of the other songs on the program, one of the pieces was the Vocalise by Previn, which we performed with Kyoko Hashimoto. And we loved it so much, and we felt that it's not as known and there aren't as many recordings of it. And it really is a piece that symbolizes and kind of shows this duet. It's a trio, so we will have a pianist on the album, and we can also talk about the amazing musicians that will be joining us. But this setting, this vocalise by Previn, the voice oftentimes in his settings is kind of the star, but in this particular setting, the voice, the piano, and the cello all have solo moments. So they're all kind of accompanying each other, which it's really a trio, if you will. And that's another piece that we love that's on the album. The Revel, I'll let Sahara, I think you discovered the Revel.
Well, it's originally for solo voice and choir. So essentially I had to reduce the choir part for just cello. And that was it requires a lot of virtuosity and a lot of illegal moves, let's say. Things that shouldn't be possible, but I've sort of somehow finagled them to be possible. You know, weird double stops, harmonic versus solid note double stops, a lot of crazy arpeggiations, just so you're getting that fullness and the lushness of that harmony that is so quintessential to Ravel's music. And I think it sounds really cool and very haunting because, I mean, if you listen to the text is very haunting. It's about losing French soldiers in the war and whatnot. So it sounds interesting, and I think we're going to bring something new to it.
Excellent. So there's a long way until the album launching, which is set on January 2026. So it's 1 year and a half. What will happen from now to there, to then?
Well, the works are being created. So all of these works are currently being written right now. We were very fortunate to receive a grant from the Conseil des Arts du Canada, Canadian Arts Council. Thank you very much, to help support the creation of these works. We're also still applying for other grants and doing other fundraising initiatives, as it is a large initiative that we are embarking on to create all of these works and in commissioned living composers. So the next year and a half, they're being written. In May of this coming spring, we will record them all at the Menforger. And in the process of this next year, we are working with ATMA to show what goes into creating a contemporary classical album, you know, in 2024, 2025. And we feel like a lot of people don't understand what goes into creating this type of art. There's a lot of information out there about how pop musicians and different commercial artists create their work, but we want to bring the public in, the general public, in this process with us, working with living composers, being a duo that is unconventional, what that means, what we're doing. And so we'll be releasing special interviews and behind the scenes material and content like we're doing today with our composers and with different members of our creative team to help promote the album, but also just to help promote Quebec music and the work that we're doing to bring new and fresh ideas to the classical music landscape.
And what would be the next step live in Montreal, for example? Are you going to play soon in Montreal too?
Yeah, and we also have a tour coming up in December back home on the West Coast.
In BC.
In BC, where we're going to like test out all these troubadour concepts and sort of tie that in together. And then early next year, we want to do a bunch of shows to sort of get experience performing these new commissions before we go and record them. So we're probably going to do a lot of smaller shows, probably in Montreal, but also just in smaller towns, to sort of workshop these pieces before we actually lay them down and record them and immortalize them.
Yeah, we'll have a tour in BC in late November and December. We mentioned in this fall, we're in residence with Yellow Barn Chamber Music Institute in the States. So we'll be working with them as well. And we may also have some concerts that haven't been announced yet in New York coming up. So that's TBD, but very exciting things on the horizon.
Yeah, so it's very exciting for the close future. So you're going to be very, very busy in the next months, I think. So,
yes.
Well, we will witness all this progression in the next month ourselves as listeners.
Yes, it's anyone who works in classical music, contemporary classical music, that's creating art, and I think just in general in our art form, they're long journeys. You know, it's a marathon, not a sprint, we always say. And so there have been months of work before this, and there are months of work ahead of us. But we're very excited to start being able to talk about the composers more publicly and the works, and being able to share that with our audiences.
Excellent. So, Vanessa Croome, Sahara von Hattenberger, je vous remercie beaucoup. I thank you very much for this. And we wish you a great continuation, and we will be there when the album will be launched in 1.5 years, and we'll try to attend your concerts in between.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
Au revoir.